So welcome to This Cycling Life. Today, we are delighted to be joined by Mathew Hayman, who, of course, all of you will know as the winner of Paris-Roubaix, but actually a cyclist who has an impressive palmarès as a long-time professional cyclist. Matt is now going through a transition, having retired from competition recently. Of course, we're going to be joined also by our co-host, TCL brilliant interviewer and all-round nice guy, Alan Davis. Alan will join us in a second. But Matt, first of all, great to have you here. And it'd be good to hear a little bit of an update from you. How are you spending your life right now?
Thanks for that introduction. Still in Belgium, where I moved to race bikes. And so after I retired, I went straight into a directing role at the same team, so Mitchelton Scott. And I've been doing that for a year and a half. It's my second year now. And we've just finished a pretty hectic pandemic-stricken season. So it was, very condensed race program and now a bit of time at home with the kids. And I was just saying to Alan before we came on that, doing what every other person's been doing in lockdown, and I just painted a couple of rooms over the week. So yeah, just a bit of time at home, and I think that has been a byproduct of this pandemic for us in Europe. That reevaluated a few things, and some time at home with the kids is what I was looking for in retirement, but probably didn't really get when I jumped straight into the car, and life didn't change that much for me.
Sure. And Matt, what has been the best thing about retirement for you? In the last, you think about the last months, having a normal life, perhaps. I mean, what have you really celebrated? Thought that's great.
I don't really have to think about grabbing that second beer. So, just in enjoying that. I guess not being as tired. I think you just live, from training and racing. Just being able to, have a good night's sleep and wake up and not. I think as an athlete, you're just continually pushing yourself. You're asking the question, if you're not tired, why aren't I tired? Have I not trained enough? Have I not done enough? And that, again, going back to being with a family, that's fine for an athlete, but being in that environment in a house and living with other people, you're not always at your best when you're tired and hungry. So, right. And that's been, So, and I guess the other thing, looking just the last couple of months, is that I don't actually miss it. So I'm pretty comfortable in that decision that I raced for long enough and raced at a high enough level, and I'm pretty satisfied. So that's a nice feeling to wake up and say, I don't miss being a professional.
Yeah. And I mean, how has your wife and kids handled having you around so much?
Look, I think they're a pretty special breed, the wife of a professional athlete or cyclist, both. And I think she's come to enjoy a bit of solitude and a bit of time by herself and ruling the roost. And then I just come home and mess it all up. There's very much when you go away to race, and even now as a director and then come home, there's a day or two there where you really have to get back into the groove and find out what the new rules are. But, we've been having a lot of fun. And as I said, it was something that I wanted to do when I retired, was to spend spend more time at home, spend more time with the kids. And it was easy to say, and it was harder to do. And through the pandemic and COVID, I've been able to actually, follow through on that and spend more time and connect more with the kids. So, but she does look forward to me going away to races. So get back to her routine. Well,
I think Albie and I can relate to you there, Matt. I guess there's two topics that we'd really like to explore with you today in terms of your life experience. The first one of those topics is really around, what does it take to be a winner and develop that winner's mindset? And then the second thing we would like to explore a bit further is that experience you've been going through, which is making the transition from being a professional athlete to life after being a competitor. Albie, why don't you shoot away, mate? Because I know you've got lots of questions that you'd like to ask Matt about his life and his story. So over to you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be interviewing again, Matty. Thank you, Jamie, for the introduction once again here on TCL. Matty, we go back a long way, mate. We were just talking about it before. I thought it was actually 97 when we first met. But I find it very interesting, and I think viewers as well, your story, that your pathway to Europe to start off with.
Yeah, I guess it wasn't the traditional one at the time. You know, I had an older brother who kind of led the way for me. So he definitely wanted to be a professional athlete and wanted to be a professional cyclist. And he came over to Europe, didn't make the national team, and came over, was racing in Holland. You know, the track program at the time was a big thing for young riders in Australia, and I think it gave us a really good, you know, skills in the sport. And I missed out on the track team, made the road team for the Junior World Championships, had a good result there. And instead of going through the Australian system, you know, felt, and with a bit of help from my family, they were pushing for me to come over and race in Holland, and yeah, started straight into a Dutch amateur team, and
Mathew,
there.
Matt, you also said we were chatting a bit earlier, and you said that actually when you came to Belgium and Holland, you actually found it easy as a junior. Because I mean, tell us a bit more about that, because you were talking about club racing in Canberra being at quite a high level at that time. Why was that?
Yeah, I feel like as Australians, we put a lot of, you know, I was going for Junior World Championships and making that team, and we had young riders in Australia that were training on a watered down version of an East German training program. And it was very specific for, you know, doing teams pursuing, and we were training at a pretty high level. And you came to Europe as a 17, 18-year-old, and it was just a path in life. It was like every kid in Australia plays cricket or goes to netball. They weren't as focused. And I think for me, it was, I want to be a professional athlete. I want to be a cyclist. I've chosen this sport. And it wasn't the easy sport to pick in Australia. So when you're committed to being a bike rider, you're really committed. So yeah, I couldn't win a race in New South Wales. You know, we're traveling around to track races and road races, and then came over to Europe, and I was cleaning up, and I was hungry for the money. There was some good prize money on even as a junior. So trying to get all the sprint preems and raced around for 6 weeks still as a junior when I came over. And, you know, it was exciting to see, you know, you'd heard about, you know, we followed SBS Tour de France. But it was exciting to be over here and just to see that there was, you know, a bunch of 100 17-year-old kids lining up 3 times a week. It was a pretty amazing experience, and fortunate to be able to have that experience, to have a family that was able to give that to me. So, but yeah, a lot more focused, and you know, it was a rite of passage for most Dutch and Belgium kids just to, you know, grab their uncle's bike and race on a Saturday morning. Where I came over, you know, off 600k a week of training and doing specific intervals, and I was able to clean up.
But I mean, you did mention something special about the Canberra Cycling Club at that time with a certain mate of ours, actually.
Yeah, well, I couldn't tell you what, I couldn't win a bike race there. I do go back to my first ever bike race was, you know, getting out of the car at a Canberra Cycling Club race, and there was a little guy warming up there, and I didn't even start. I put the bike back in the car. Got out next week. He cleaned me up. You know, won easily, and it was Mick Rogers. So looking back, you know, it was I you know, to be beaten by somebody who went on to do what he did, 3 times world champion, stages, Tour de France, Giro, amazing. But at the time, you know, I'm a sore loser. But yeah, looking back, it wasn't such a bad guy to be up against. And you know, from the two of us were, you know, a constant through my whole career actually. You know, we came back and we were teammates at Sky years later. So you know, it's pretty special friendship we have, and rivalry at times too.
You mentioned, Matty, like your brother was over here racing as well during that phase, and also we know Mick's older brothers as well. Do you think that influenced your pathways as well, the younger brothers?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. You know, we were known in Canberra in the cycling area. You know, the 2 families, the Rogers and the Haymans. You know, I've got 2 brothers, and I think the sport in Australia, like I said, it's a bit of a marginal sport at the time, especially at that level. So, and it was very much welcoming. I mean, we started in Goulburn, which is a small country town, and it was, you know, they welcomed us, any new member to the club, and then we moved to Canberra, we were given contacts straight away, and it became and the club and the community that you had around cycling is something different to Europe. You know, here it is a sport, it's just a pastime, people view it. In Australia, it's something that you do. It's not just viewed. And, you know, we've found a great community moving to Canberra. We already had a group of friends just through being involved in cycling. And I love the fact that, you know, in Australia, you can go out with a bunch ride in the morning. I still miss this. And you stop at a coffee shop at the end of a ride, and you will have an 18-year-old kid talking to a doctor, a surgeon, an electrician next to him, a lawyer, and you just have a vast array of people. And they're all just, you know, one might have a more expensive bike than the other, but they're all just enjoying riding their bikes. And it doesn't matter what your profession is, it's how fast you can get up that hill or how good a bike rider you are. So, you know, that's always been pretty special.
Matt, I'm curious to learn more a bit about that experience that you had, because I guess one of the recurring things that we've heard, and you know, we know many sports directors. A great friend of mine is a guy called Bernard Moorman, who's a legend of Belgian cycling. He ran what was called the Cycling Centre here in Belgium for many years. And one of the things that Bernard has often talked about is this kind of strength of character that the guys like the Australians develop by coming to Europe and being so far from home.
But there was many times when I really, you know, it was pretty low. It was pretty lonely. The only time I was truly happy as an amateur, those first kind of 3 years, still unsure about making it, and where I felt really comfortable was in the team environment and at races when we were doing well and winning. So that was, you know, when I felt at my best, and it was coming home after races and the time between races when it was the hard work, the training and the loneliness that I really suffered. So but yeah, getting back to a race and winning again, and you were back on track, and yeah, so that was, I guess resilience was one of the big ones. Just being really determined about, this is where I want to be, and this is my goal. And you know, I had some success as an amateur, and then I think it started again when you know, I was more comfortable once I turned professional and I had my spot. So you turn professional, feeling less of that, you know, homesickness and feeling, but then again, we start at the bottom again. So I'd turned professional, I thought I'd made it, but all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of other things, you know, you're not winning anymore. You're back at the bottom of the pecking order. So it kind of all starts again. So again, back to that resilience of having to start again from the bottom.
So this time, Matty, so you're talking about specifically was the Rabobank under 23 program as well, right, that you were involved with. You think, like what Jay said about the characteristical aspects you had or the Australians have, you think they were aware of it at the time as well, having you on the team?
Yeah, I guess the boys did sometimes ask me about, you know, what it was like to be so far away from home, and they could see that drive, and that you didn't really have an option. You know, I used to have a teammate that came to live with me, and he was an hour from his house, and because it was better for training, and he couldn't do it. He had to go home, and he had to, you know, have mum's cooking and speak in his dialect, and you know, he couldn't really handle it. He got homesick being an hour away. So but then had I been an hour from home, maybe I wouldn't have been able to. You know, the gap was so far. The flight, you know, some of the English guys are not that far from home. So yeah, it is, you know, I was driven, you know, early on I felt I was pretty talented. I was a bit cocky as a young kid, and, you know, I liked to win, and it was all about winning, and it wasn't about the bike. I know my older brother was very much about the training and the bike and perfection and all that. And to me, it was just racing. It was, you know, I really wanted to race and I wanted to win, and I was a sore loser. And I still am. I still am. You should see me play Monopoly with my son.
I mean, it's hilarious what you say. I mean, because you and I are both living in Belgium, right? And
yeah,
you know, I always laugh when I'm talking to my Belgian mates, you know, because they're like, you know, they're from Antwerp and they have to go to Brugge. And they're like, oh, look, Jamie, I've got to go. I've got a long trip today. And it's like 70 kilometers. And you've got to be kidding me. So there is that sort of, they call it the kerktorenmentaliteit, the living under the church tower kind of mentality. But Matt, I remember at the start of this interview, we said, smile, Matt, smile. Because it's funny because, often when I would see you racing or before a race, you would look very serious, right? But the other thing, that when we talk to champions, no matter how serious they are, the champion always talks about their passion and their love for the sport. Can you talk to us about that? I mean, did that fire ever sort of go? I mean, where did that fire stay there for you throughout your career? Just that love and passion for the sport that you do? And how did you kindle it? Yeah,
I think it did. I do love it. I still can't, I need to watch it. I need to be around it. It's very much, I got, the hours of training and the commitment that's required, that started to weigh on me. But, if I could have continued racing without putting in the rest and without, doing the hard work, which was what it is, essentially, I would have, I love the racing. I love the atmosphere. I love being a group. I love the, getting a game plan together and strategizing and saying, okay, this is our best opportunity. How are we going to play that out on the road?
Oh,
so,
Matt,
we talk about winners mentality. I didn't win that much. But I felt like every time I started a race, the goal was to win. It might have been a teammate of mine, and like I said, I'm a pretty sore loser, and I am serious. I think I can have a joke, but when it comes to bike racing, I'm pretty serious about it. Hey,
Matt, look, LB, I reckon, look, Matt, anytime you get that fire in your belly to race again, LB's my coach, so you can always be my lead out man at a kermesse here in Belgium anytime you like, mate. You're just down the road in Limburg, so I'll give you a call next season and we'll see what we can do, right? That'll be good. LB, what else you want to ask? Because you had loads of questions on your list there.
I find that very interesting that you just said, Matty, about, the reality is you don't always win. But now after you finish racing, that plan that we always had into place, with your mates, with your comrades, that team plan, is that something that you miss, not having that camaraderie, that plan and that mateship going into battle?
Yeah, look, I mean, now with the transition and coming in, now being a director on the team, I'm still getting that, and I guess that's part of my transition was, how do you go from just doing this, and it was something that I was worried about, something that I talked to my wife about, that I talked to my sports psych about. How am I going to go from being full on, and I think being a director, of still being around the race, the first time I heard the race radio crackle again in Tour of Poland after being away for so many months, I went, I do really miss this, and having to devise a plan, and so I'm still getting that. But yeah, it has moved. The boys are already 6 months, a year, 2 years. They're at a different table. That was the hardest thing, actually. We sit at a hotel and we sit down at a table, and there's a rider's table and there's a staff table. And the first time I had to go and sit at the staff table was tough. And I think the training camp at the end of the season, and when I was actually should have been on the staff table for the next year, and I kind of stuck with the riders because that's where I felt comfortable. And so I'm moving away. But now I've got my own team, which is the staff team, and still communicating with the riders about, okay, this is what the plan is. And I'm still a sore loser. So every day I go out there and I want to get the best out of the guys and try and work and pull in one direction and try and navigate and that's what makes me tick now.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, you've talked about. I mean, it's interesting making that transition now to having to support, encourage, inspire others. When we talked about this champion's mindset, I mean, you talked about resilience, right? This importance of the fortitude, if you like, getting up when you're being knocked down. Yeah. You talked a bit about keeping that passion, that love for your sport. But something else which struck me was, again, when I guess saw some of the interviews with you around Paris-Roubaix, it was almost like you had these mantras that you would say to yourself. Your famous one is, I think it was never stop riding, right?
Yeah.
can you talk to us a little bit about how you would in a way, whether you had particular kind of habits or sayings? I mean, did you talk to yourself during races? Did you use those mantras for yourself? How did you build yourself up? You mentioned sports psychology, which is an interesting one. What was your way to really get yourself mentally there in the race?
Yeah, look, I think when I break down Paris-Roubaix, it was bringing together 15 years, whether it was from racing as a 17-year-old, it was everything seemed for me to come together on that day. And there is a number of different psychology methods that I've used, and I think actually just the other day I heard somebody talking about athletes, and they're talking about people lying to themselves and the ability to lie to yourself. And they then interviewed a bunch of athletes, and the best athletes were the ones that were able to do it, because you just have to keep telling yourself that you're going to do something which you know is going to hurt, or you're going to probably fail. And every single day you have to get yourself back up to that level to go and try it again. So that was the thing. And
can you give us an example of that? I mean, what would you say to yourself in a race, or how, you know?
I mean, yeah, I mean, if it's cold or it's wet, or you're doing Roubaix for the 10th time and you're pretty sure that it's probably not going to win, and Fabian or Tom's probably going to be better than you, but you have to stand on the start line and believe and try and make yourself believe that you're going to have a shot at it. And you know you're going to be disappointed, or there's a fair chance you're going to be disappointed at the end of the day, but without, you know, building yourself up for that. And I guess towards the end of my career, I actually, you know, used tactics where you try to take yourself out of that. You get caught up in that mind, the constant, this hurts, or this is bad, or this is pain, the negative thoughts. So just trying to break those negative thoughts. Thinking about it before, what are the things that are going to, you know, are really going to start me thinking on a negative thought? Be ready for that, and then have something to take yourself away from those kind of negative thoughts. Those are some of the tricks that I learned over the years. They're not always easy to put into place, and sometimes you forget them, and sometimes you get caught up in them. But if you've got a few of those tricks, you know, and that's some of the stuff now that I try and help with different guys, and not everybody needs it. Some guys, you know, I think Alan, as a rider, was a natural winner. He didn't think about it. He didn't overanalyze it. He just wanted to win. He got himself into situations and he won. And you're going to handle an athlete like that a little bit different to somebody you can see is a bit insecure, not really sure of themselves, need to be encouraged in different ways. So yeah, it's just been a process, and I try and take a little bit from everywhere. But
just last question on that, Matt, before I want to hand over to Albie again for another question. You know, as you age as an athlete, I mean, obviously, naturally, physiologically, there is stuff that happens, usually on a downward curve. How do you keep self-belief? You know, when you say you are lining up at a race, but you look around and you know that guys, you know, at a very pure analytical level are better than you, can produce more power than you. Again, I mean, how do you keep that sense of self-belief, almost a self-belief beyond reason, when you look at the logic of those around you?
I guess I just tap into the fact that you have that experience. You know, I definitely noticed by the end of my career that I could, you know, ride a lot smarter. You know, just feel it a lot better. And you didn't, you know, it was hard to think sometimes, why do these guys not see this? You know, why are they doing these things? And just hoping that, you know, you hadn't missed something. Sometimes second guessing yourself, but yeah, just going, okay, I've got the years of experience. I know when it's important. I know when I need to be in that situation. And also just looking for, you know, in a professional team, there were certain aspects where I could still be the best, and I could always work on something. And it didn't have to be winning the race, but I wanted to be the best domestique, or I wanted to nail my job and do my job to the best of ability. So they were the things that kind of motivated me and helped me towards the end. And I really enjoyed being the road captain and kind of, you know, really channeling and making sure that the team worked well together. And that was something that, you know, motivated me as well towards the end of my career. So, and now doing it again, so it's great.
I think you were born a really good captain, road captain, whether in whatever sport you're doing, you have that attributes naturally, I think, Matty. But while on the subject of Roubaix, Matty, my question is, and the classics, when did the penny drop that you wanted to be a classics rider, or you particularly wanted to excel in Roubaix and itself? Like, was that overnight, or was it a before you're a professional thing, or was it something that happened over time?
Yeah, good question. I guess, I'm pretty satisfied with my career. I said that. I'm happy with it. But I guess if I am honest with myself and I look back to when I was 17, I wanted to win stages in the Tour de France. And now I wasn't a fast enough sprinter and I wasn't a good enough climber. And so that pretty much cancelled that out. But so as soon as I came to Europe and being in a Dutch team, I mean, we were racing in the crosswinds, we were racing in Belgium and Holland and France all the time. And then, and you just start to realize, wait a minute, these guys are suffering. And then when I go to Italy and Spain and it's up a hill, I'm not as good. My physical ability, and I guess you just start to enjoy what you're good at. If you're able to just make it into the front group in the crosswinds, if you're able to, you realize that everyone else is complaining about these cobblestones. It's not that they don't hurt as much or they're not as rough. You just seem to be better, and it's nice to, you're in it there to cause pain and other guys are suffering and you're doing well. Roubaix took a bit of convincing. A lot of people were saying early on, you're good at this race. And I tell you what, I've had some pretty horrific experiences in Roubaix. And I think it wasn't until, I can't remember the year, but there was one particular year, and I remember I think Stewie Punch and I might have crashed, and we got back to a group and we came in within about 3 minutes of the winner, 2.5 minutes. And that was the first time, because before that I'd been ridden. People would say, oh, Roubaix, that's great for you. You're big and it's flat and you love the cobbles. But I just couldn't, I couldn't get through that race. And there was times just so far behind. So again, that perseverance and that was the first time. That was the thing that a spark kind of said, yeah, I can do this race. And
after how many times was that attempting?
That was probably six or 8 times. No. And mechanics and Swannies would be like, oh, you love Roubaix. I was going okay in some of the Belgian races, but it was that step up. It was like the Tour de France of races. So you can be going okay in races, and then you get to Roubaix and it's that next level, and guys were just going faster and harder, and it was just that much more commitment for every corner that you just didn't have in the other races. And I was starting to get some okay results or riding in the front of the bunch in some of the smaller classics, but it took a while for me to believe that I could be in the front.
So, Matt, I think, for me, I mean, we talked a lot here about resilience and courage, but, me knowing what you did in Roubaix, I think the most courageous thing that you did was continue living in Belgium after beating Tom Boonen. I mean, do people still give you like dirty looks at the bakery and stuff, or how does that go, man? Yeah,
look, I just had a guy come around the other day to have a look at the roof, and he looked at me a couple of times and said, you the one that, yeah, I know, Tom. So yeah, it comes up. I'm pretty fortunate that Tom was such a champion on the day. And he congratulated me. He said all the right things in the media. And, I think it's the only thing is that I took his 5th and being all-time record holder away from him. But other than that, he was happy for me. And look, at the end of the day, he was the only one who could feel his legs, and he'll admit he made mistakes in the sprint, but he.
Mate, come on. I mean, as my coach Alan Davis says, Matt, you're here to win a bike race, not a popularity contest. So yeah, we're okay. Look, why don't we shift gears? I mean, what I'm really keen now to talk about is this transition. Yeah. Because Matt, we do see that, and we've interviewed a bunch of guys on TCL, a bunch of ladies as well, actually, about that shift. And I guess one of the things that has struck us is how unprepared many professional athletes are for that shift. I mean, of course, for some of them, as we're seeing this year, it comes as a shock. You know, with COVID, people are not getting contracts renewed. But for others, you know, there is a lead into the expectation of retirement.
Yeah.
In your experience, having spent so many years as a professional, why do you think it is that so few professional cyclists actually really start to think and prepare for that shift?
Just denial, just not wanting it to stop, not wanting it, just in denial, I think. I mean, I was very lucky to be able to race to the end. Early on in my career, I had a vein operation, and I had a couple of, you know, operations that were, you know, I felt like my career was in the balance, and I started to look at some study, and that was the only time that I really, but outside of that, you know, like we said, going through school, I was in school, I took French class in school. I was awful at it, but it was because that was the language they speak at the UCI. That's professional cycling. I was sure this is what I was going to do. It was only that injury really early on, and then the rest of it, it was just, I'm just going to be a rider, and I'm going to deny that this is going to happen, right up until it kind of happened. And being a bit scared, I guess. You know, it was a tough choice, and looking back, it hasn't been as hard as I thought it was going to be. But I think humans, you know, I do, you know, regularity, doing the same thing, getting the same, you know, and I was really addicted to just training and racing, and it was a merry-go-round that I was happy to be on, and I just didn't want to even think about getting off it. And, you know, I talked to a few guys. I talked to Stu. I remember talking to Stewie and Matt Goss, and they were saying, look, it isn't as bad as you think. And that'll be my advice for people going forward. But that doesn't really answer your question why we don't prepare for it. You know, I guess denial, but maybe we should be preparing for it more. And, you know, I've been lucky enough to have a job where I'm still attached to it. I'm still feeling some of those same emotions. I'm still getting some of that thing. I've tried to keep my activity levels up. That was hard to start with. You know, I really did think I had to train every day, and I had to kind of detrain, and I was still putting on a heart rate monitor and trying to monitor things. And I've been able to just go, well, no, I'm exercising because I want to exercise, not because there's any reason to. And it doesn't have to be, you know, if my Garmin's flat, I can still go for a ride because I'm actually doing it because I want to. It's not to tick any box. So, yeah, if I had my time again, I don't know if there's anything that I would change, because, you know, when I was racing, I was so into it, and I didn't really want to have that backup plan. I guess it was like leaving the airplane ticket in the back of the drawer. While I haven't thought about, I can't not succeed in doing what I'm doing.
What about, Matty, with today, like within the teams and your team yourself, like, you know, especially with the riders getting on in their careers, is it something that's spoken about, a transition, you know, or a discussion that's had, or is it kind of forbidden because the teams are investing in these riders for that moment? They're not really worried about them after it. Is it a topic?
Yeah, I think not from probably a team side of it, but definitely the older riders start to talk about it. You know, it was getting asked to me, and the first time you get asked about it is a shock. And, you know, there is a bit of people trying to find out when I'm going to move on, you know, because you still, you know, you're in a team together and you're very much friends and mates, but they're the same people going for your contract, and people are trying to suss out which positions are coming free. So yeah, it is a tough one to ask an older rider. So when you're thinking of retiring, and what are your plans? So yeah, it's, you know, some of the older riders get together and start to talk about it. But yeah, something that the cards are definitely held a little bit close to the chest as far as it's a bit of a sign of weakness talking about retirement.
But for me, it's interesting what you said about, in a way, after you retired, that sort of urge to be doing stuff, right?
Yeah.
To be active. And I guess one of the things that we do see is that many cyclists retire and they immediately jump into coaching, or they jump into opening a bike shop, they get into bike fit, they do really, or they go and work for a cycling team, as you have done, but often they go in as I don't know, any kind of role, just to get a job in a way. And one of the conversations we've had, or actually several conversations recently, has been with cyclists who I guess confuse the difference between skills and talents. Because if you see those people who have been pro cyclists and then they jump immediately into a cycling related job, they're defaulting to the skills they have, whether it's what they know about coaching or nutrition or bike fit or aerodynamics or whatever it might be. However, when they do that, they often realize that it's not really what excites them or gives them passion or energy. Whereas it was also interesting to hear what you said, which was that late in your athletic career, you started to realize you had this talent as a leader, right? As a road captain. So if we were to ask you today, what is Matt Hayman great at besides riding a bike? What are your talents that you've started to discover perhaps later in your career and certainly now during this transition?
Good question. I think you're right there that, just having athletic prowess and having that ability to ride fast doesn't always mean you're going to be great in business or other things. And I think you've had that, alpha male mindset and just, winning and everything's a race, and you come into the normal world and you realize that that's not the case. For me personally, I've always, I really get a lot of satisfaction out of bringing a group together and working around a group and trying to find, use my experience and what I've learned to help other guys perform to their best, I guess is the best way to kind of bring that down. I spend a lot of time thinking about what I would like to hear and what I'd like to have said to me during a race or pre-race, or how I felt, what things in my career that really stuck with me and helped me and changed me. And I am a big believer that, your environment, your mindset, the culture around you, all those things can change performance massively. If you're happy with what you're doing, and I think, yes, training and your physical ability is one thing, but how can I, by bringing a couple of riders together and making them work more cohesively, or have them happier and build an environment, make them perform better and realize their dreams and aspirations, that's something that motivates me.
Yeah, I agree, Matty. I think that's well said, especially the chemistry and the ambience created within the teams, and the teams that are doing that these days are the ones getting the best results.
Yeah, 100%. It's hit and miss, and it's and we talk about the word culture and how you create that and how you do it, and some of it I don't think can be measured, and it's just passion and exuberance, and you've got to realize when it's good and think, okay, how do we recreate that, and how do we carry that on and continue in that vein, and also recognize what's not working, recognize what's not helping the team as a whole, and try and nip that in the bud and move on from there. So yeah,
but it's interesting as well, because you started to discover these talents, in a way, many of these hidden talents, and what it sounds like as well is that in discovering those talents, you're also becoming more and more passionate about what you do in that role. I taught for many years. I still teach at business school.
Yeah.
And one of the phenomena we see at business schools often is that people come in their mid-30s, sometimes early 40s, and they do an executive MBA.
Yeah.
And the reason they do that is they've got to a certain point in their life where actually they've been doing a career sometimes for 15 and 20 years. They're starting to realize that it's not really creating the passion that they need or the sense of purpose. So they might be a finance expert or an HR person or an operations manager, but they do their executive MBA. And then what they do is they often find themselves shifting into a different industry or a different sector. And for me, that's also very interesting because I had a conversation yesterday with Tyler Hamilton. Wonderful chat, actually. And it's taken Tyler a long time to work out, actually, that his skills in terms of being able to do a lot of things that you're talking about, inspire people, support them to be better, to get them to think about their future. He's now working for an organization called Black Swift Group, which is basically providing financial advice and guidance to professional cyclists. So although it's still a little bit in the cycling world, he's actually moved into the financial services industry.
Yeah.
What's your take on that? Again, because I think, maybe it's that many pro cyclists, they're so much in their bubble that they simply don't think about how these skills and abilities can transfer to other jobs, other industries or sectors.
Yeah, look, it is a bubble. It is 100% a bubble, and you kind of sign up for that. And that's not just, it's also with your family and everything around you. You have to be so self-centered and driven just in one direction, and it can cost a lot, and having that. But yeah, I think it's that passion and finding that passion in something else, which is, and are you able to find that passion outside of the sport? Because that's what got you up, and that's what, and when that's missing, how do you try and fill that in with adrenaline, or what are you going to fill that hole with? So yeah, I'm not sure that I've found it. I'm really enjoying this role, and I'm still very close to a bunch of guys who I have a connection with, and I want to see perform to their best. And that gap's going to widen, and there's going to be more and more guys. The guys that I'm raced with are going to start retiring, and that gap will widen, and who knows where I'll end up. But at the same time, it'll be hard for me to turn my back on cycling, because it has given me absolutely everything. It's and like you just pointed out, there's an example of it still has that connection to cycling, but it's such a, there are so many kind of satellite parts to this sport. Who knows? Maybe we can finally fix the financial system that is professional cycling, and make it more sustainable.
As you know, I mean, your old mate Michael Rogers is now innovation manager at the UCI. I mean, he's now pioneering and leading the way when it comes to the future of virtual cycling and e-bikes and innovation. So, I mean, I think that's another example of someone who's kind of discovered these talents that they have, which are probably the team role in a different area.
Michael and I go way back, and I remember him. He was signed up to go to my school, and I remember him dropping out, and him talking about it later and saying, "Why was I so silly to drop out and be so focused?" And he had to go back and he self-taught himself a lot of these things, and he was always interested in computers and software, and the first time I ever saw a Mac computer was definitely at Michael's place, but a lot of that self-taught, and he skipped that education, and now he's gone back and searched for it. So, hats off to him for putting in that time. And part of my story of winning Roubaix was through using an online platform and using Zwift to help me motivate and stimulate and to be able to get through all those training sessions to get to that level. And it's opened up cycling to so many people who otherwise wouldn't be riding bikes because the roads, or living in cities, or family life and commitments. So it's great to see Mick in that position, and if he becomes president, maybe I'll find out a way how we can get all the race organisers to divide up the rights money, and we can all have.
Let's not open a can of worms there, Matt. Look, we might have maybe just one or two more questions with the time we have left. On again, sticking with this topic of transitions, Albie, anything else you'd like to ask on this topic of shifting gear, shifting career?
I'm finding it really interesting. I obviously have watched the interviews you had with Swain Tuft as well, Jay. I've probably got more of a question for you as a teacher and academic yourself, and me understanding Matty, and obviously being a coach still in and involved with the UCI myself with cycling. So I'm still in the bubble as well. But backing up what Matty was saying, I enjoy the bubble. Like I really enjoy it. My family enjoys it. It's been my bubble for 20 years. And I find, like, my question to you would be, why would I change that bubble if I'm enjoying it? Why would, if it's not
Absolutely.
broken, why fix it?
That's a great question. And Alan, my advice is don't. Don't. If that's your passion, if cycling is your passion, I think the challenge is finding your groove. It's very interesting. And again, I'm sure Michael won't mind it, but if we use the example of Michael Rogers, what was his first step after a pro career? To become a performance director, right? And what was he doing? He was going back to his skills, training, aerodynamics, all that stuff. But what has Michael discovered over the last couple of years of his journey? That actually his real talent and his real passion lies more in the area that Matt talks about. He was always interested in technology. He was always interested in innovation. He's actually someone who's passionate about lifelong learning. So actually, what we've seen, haven't we, with Michael, is that he still stays in that world of cycling that he's passionate about. However, he's now found himself, and we could say actually with what he's done with the UCI, he's created that role for himself that aligns with his deeper talents, not just his skills when it comes to cycling. Does that make sense, Albie? And, if we want to talk about something funny, what did I do? I was racing state, national level up until the time I was 19 years old. But, because of my family situation and lots of reasons, I decided to take the safe path, and I went on to university and I became a business school professor in strategy. But where am I today at age 50? Here I am with you guys, because I've come full cycle. I've come back to cycling again because I love being part of this bubble. However, what do I do in this world? I bring my expertise and talents that I understand about leadership and strategy and the stuff we're talking today. All I'm doing now is combining that stuff with my passion for this beautiful sport. Does that answer your question, Albie?
Yeah, and that answers it well, mate. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, Matt, last question for you, I guess, is, looking forward 3 years from now, what will a beautiful life look like for Matt Hayman and family?
We're at a bit of a crossroads, I guess, with a young family. I've got 3 kids. The eldest is 9, and I've got twins that are 3. We're at a bit of a crossroads about whether we continue to stay in Europe. And it was a massive thing for my wife to. She raced as well, but to move from sunny Italy to it's not a bad day in Belgium. But
hey, Matt, everyone's complaining about global warming except the people who live in Belgium, right? So
they think it's great. No, so there is a pull to get back to Australia, and 6 months ago, 12 months ago, there was no problem with jumping on a flight to Europe whenever you wanted to. But the world has realigned. It's still a bit of a crossroads for us. There's part of us that would love our kids to grow up with the same kind of, we reminisce about our school days and growing up in Australia, and you kind of, I feel like my 9-year-old is missing out a bit. That he doesn't know it. He's enjoying himself. He loves going to school here in Belgium, so really not sure. So there could be a bit of a change, and talking today, I think that if I did have to change and it couldn't be as closely related to professional cycling, that it would still be in that kind of, performance, but, leadership kind of role in performance and getting performance out of people.
Good on you, Matty. All kids need to learn cricket as well.
He has no idea, mate. He has no idea.
Mate, I tell you what, Matty, I've been so happy. I know a lot of parents complain about, YouTube and the online world, but, my kids have discovered laser beam. I don't know if your son watches laser beam, this like Australian it's just fantastic. The language and everything is horrendous, but it's very Australian, and they become big fans. So they can get much more of that immersion into Australian culture being here in Belgium than they could before. My 17-year-old son came home a couple of days ago and said, "Dad, I'm thinking about getting a mullet." This is, honestly, Matt, that didn't come from me, So.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, my 9-year-old thinks Axel Witsel plays for the Australian soccer team. So most Australians, he's soccer, and he knows the Belgian national selection on the back of his hand. So it's time to get him home, I think. Get him into nippers.
Sure. Good stuff. Well, with that, Mathew Hayman and Alan Davis, it's been terrific talking to you both. Absolute pleasure as always. Matt, we wish you every success with your future. We're sure that future is going to be very, very bright. For everyone who's been watching today, if you have liked this video, please do give us the thumbs up. And of course, do subscribe to the This Cycling Live YouTube channel. Mathew Hayman, thank you very much. Alan Davis, thanks again.
Thanks, Jay. Good on you, Matty.
Thanks, guys.